Hey there, it's Lara here with your weekly Witchy Wednesday astrology forecast. This time for the week of Wednesday, December 12th to Tuesday, December 18th, 2018. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Um, Thanks for, subscribing to the channel and liking the videos and sending me messages and leaving comments. I do really appreciate that. And just before I get started, I want to let you know that um, if you would like to order a reading, then you can still do that before Christmas, but I can't guarantee you at this point that you're going to get it before Christmas, unfortunately, because I'm working on some readings right now for people that I have promised to have to them before Christmas. And so that's pretty much all I can put on my plate between now and then and guarantee. So, but I'm still here. If you're interested in having a look, several people over the last few weeks have ordered not only a full chart reading, but also a full tarot. I do a tarot spread that covers sort of the period ahead, right? And you get to choose whatever that time frame is, but some people are opting for, the course of the year. Some people do it from their birthday forward. Some people just do it over a season. It sort of depends. But that's on my website. If you're interested, you can have a look, and the link will be below, and you can take a look at what I'm talking about. So, moving on though, let's get to what we're here for, right? So at first glance, it doesn't appear that there is a whole lot going on in the sky this week for a change, right? Aside from the fact that Mercury is changing signs and moving into Sagittarius. It had been in Sag for just a little bit before it went retrograde, right? And then it ended up back in Scorpio for a bit and is moving forward again. And so now re-entering Sagittarius. And when that happens, keeping in mind Mercury is the planet of the mind, of communication, of our thoughts, all things communication, right? And it rules sort of the tools of communication as well. And so when it moves into Sagittarius, then those things, those Mercury ruled things, become more optimistic, right? That's a Sagittarius thing. More or quality rather, becomes more perhaps forward thinking and looking into the future. Maybe more bird's eye view, like looking at the broader perspective. Can be focused on sort of bigger picture thinking. And all of that is great. The only caveat is just be mindful at this time that you're not losing sight of the details, right? So, and I mentioned this to you before because, like I said, Mercury was in Sag for a little bit before going retrograde back into Scorpio. So there's that. And that really looks like it's the only major event that's happening this week. However, when you dig a little deeper and take a look at the roots of astrology and what ancient peoples focused on, then there are actually a couple things happening over the course of this time that are, pretty significant. And before I launch into that and sort of the core of what we're going to talk about here, I just want to give credit where credit's due and let you know that a lot of what I learned about this kind of thing, about sort of more ancient astrology, right, is through Astrology. So she has a website. She does tons of YouTube videos of various astrologers and readers associated with her work. But through her, I sort of discovered, you know, and have dabbled in. I'm by no means an expert. That's not my area of expertise at all. But just sort of, more ancient astrology, the ancient Babylonians and Mesopotamians, that kind of thing, and who are the, really where astrology was originally birthed. And so before the onset of telescopes and and that kind of scientific equipment, it was all about what could be seen with the naked eye, right? From our place here on Earth. And so that's how ancient peoples used the stars to navigate their lives, really, and, read the messages and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to give credit there to Astrolata. And, if you're interested in checking out her site and her YouTube channel, then, if you just Google Astrolata, you'll find her. She's well known. So anyway, so I'm going to get into that. That's sort of going to be the core of what we discuss here today. And yes, I am going to go through each of the signs and speak to certain events that are happening. And I'm going to tell you about that in just a minute. I do want to let you know where the moon is. If you've been around here before, then you know that I like to do that. And we don't go into a lot of details here, but I just like to let you know where the moon is because, to refresh your memory, right, the moon is the fastest moving planet, shifts signs every 2.5 days. And we are closely connected to it because it's close to Earth, and it's really in our awareness more than any of the other planets. It impacts us as humans here on Earth, right? The cycles of nature, the tides, all of that. Our emotions are ruled by the moon, our feelings, our emotions. And so if we pay attention to the moon cycles, we can get more in tune, with sort of the general cycles of nature and the cosmos and the universe. But we also get to know our own ebbs and flows and cycles as well. And so certain people, depending on your own chart makeup, your own sort of astrological makeup, will be impacted by the moon in different places in the chart differently. So like it will kind of depend. I'll just give you a personal example. And you may have heard me mention this before. My natal moon, so where the moon was when I was born, was in Scorpio. And that's pretty intense, actually. In fact, the moon is considered in its fall in Scorpio, which means its least favorite place to be, really, kind of thing. Just putting it very simply. But that all depends on how you respond to that energy, right? It depends on other things in your chart and your overall kind of makeup. Personally, I love when the moon is in Scorpio. It feels very in tune with my already sort of intense and probing nature, right? And so, but other people, depending on your details of your own birth chart, may not feel so great when the moon's in Scorpio. And also that may have to do with sort of where you're at, right? So a person's level of awareness and consciousness, that kind of thing, can also impact how you absorb these energies or how you relate to these energies, how you respond to these energies, right? Of wherever the moon or any of the other planets is at, right? So right now the moon is in Aquarius, and it's a great time to be talking about things like astrology, actually. Aquarius is very sort of future minded, right? And it's like I've said this before about Aquarius, and I've not heard really anybody else express it in this terminology, but for me, Aquarius is like this. It's a bit of a paradoxical sign, but it's about the blending of the ancient and the futuristic almost. That's kind of the way I see it. So anyways, the moon is in Aquarius right now, and it's entering Pisces on Thursday, which is a great time for, artistic endeavors, creativity, going to the theater, music, for rest and relaxation and just, zoning out with Netflix kind of thing. It's a good time for all of that. And then it moves into Aries on Saturday, which is a little bit more action oriented. And finally, Taurus, the sort of earthy, slow moving sign of Taurus on Tuesday. So, and then Mercury is re-entering Sagittarius today, which is the 12th of December. So you may feel that shift in your mind, in your mindset, in your thinking, on your communications, as Mercury shifts into Sag. And again, it's not necessarily that it's like this flash suddenly. Some people can experience the planetary shifts like that, but it's more like a gradual unfolding, right? A gradual momentum is building. And before I get more into the crux of this whole video, I just want to also remind you that we still have this water trine. So I'm going to show you the chart right now. This is a good time to do that. So this is a chart for if you're Eastern Standard Time, that's my time. So that's what I use here. You can adjust accordingly. But this is for about 11, what did I draw it up for? 11:25 was when I drew up this chart, 11:25 a.m. So this is what the chart looks like for today. And so I was just mentioning to you that water trine, right? I spoke to this in last week's video. So if you want to know more details about this, you can go back to last week's video and have a listen. But here is the North Node in Cancer, and it is trining Mercury at the very end of Scorpio, and also Chiron at the end of Pisces there, right? And so this is a water trine. I'll put this down for a second so I can talk to you, and then I'll pick it back up. And I mentioned to you that there is a good opportunity here for some healing work to happen. And, water medicine, that's kind of what I like to call it, is really, when you're talking about healing, like water is a healing element, right? It's associated with healing, the water signs. And it has this capacity to really percolate into everything and to clear out whatever's in there, right? To flush it all out, to go deep, to move things out. Like, just think of the qualities of water. And it is very associated with our feelings and our emotions, right? And so you may be experiencing some of this as this water trine is happening. And soon, Chiron's going to move out of Pisces, and Mercury is moving out of Scorpio later today. And so this is kind of the tail end of that, but you may have been feeling this buildup happening, and this surge, let's call it a surge, I think that's a better word, of this kind of healing energy. And it may not have been all that comfortable. And I'm going to tell you, speaking to my own experience here, especially with Mercury and Scorpio, and there's some things going on in my own chart related to that, but it's been intense. Necessary, deep, uncomfortable, intense. That's what I would say, but profound as well, right? And so, I'm not sure if you've been experiencing anything similar, but I just thought I'd share that with you. So that's the water trine as it plays out here. And then the other things I'll show you, because I'm going to speak to them here, is, so we've got the sun still in Sagittarius, right? And there is Jupiter in Sag as well. And the sun is moving away from Jupiter now, so getting farther away from Jupiter. But Mercury is moving closer to Jupiter, and will meet up with Jupiter around the 21st, around the solstice in Sagittarius. And so, I'm going to talk to you about that further in a minute. And then I also am going to speak to you about Saturn, who was closer to the sun, and now the sun is moving, it's moving further away, sort of, from the sun as well. Sorry, no, my bad. No. rewind. Saturn and the sun are moving closer together. Jupiter and Mercury, or the sun is moving further away from Jupiter and Mercury. That's what I'm trying to say here. So, sorry about that, flub up. Okay, so in ancient times, like I mentioned to you, what was most important was what was visible with the naked eye, right? Because they didn't have telescopes and stuff. And so when a planet became visible in the sky, this was a big deal. Similarly, when a planet became invisible in the sky, so you weren't able to see it with the naked eye anymore, that was also a big deal. And it's like, if you think of the death rebirth cycle, right? It is this notion of the birth of the planet or the rebirth of the planet, and then the death of the planet or the retreat of the planet when it's not visible any longer. And this happens because, so when a planet is close to the sun, it's like, to put it simply, like the sun outshines the planet kind of thing. So we aren't able to see it from Earth. And in ancient times, they used to consider that the planet, as a planet retreated and you couldn't see it anymore, right? It was going to sort of enter some wise counsel with the sun, right? And so it was kind of going on a retreat, so to speak. And it would gather whatever information. This is my words, but gather, whatever wise counsel, and then as it would reappear in the sky, it was bringing forth that new information kind of thing, right? Again, putting it simply. So, when a planet becomes invisible, the energies and the matters sort of associated with that planet, they become less evident. They go on retreat. And when a planet becomes visible, the energies and matters associated with it become more obvious, more manifest. So this is like, it kind of sounds, I know as I'm describing it, kind of like when a planet goes retrograde, but it's not the same thing. Because when a planet goes retrograde, it's more of a turning inward of that energy, right? And it's like putting on the brakes as well, so things can get a little bit bumpy. Whereas when a planet is going in and out of sight, and again, this is according to what we see with the naked eye. This doesn't have to do with what we can see through a telescope. This is more like it's like a waxing and a waning. It's like a retreat and a resurgence kind of thing, right? Of the energy. And so, just like, any other astrological event, it doesn't happen like overnight like that, right? So these energies are intensified over the course of a couple of weeks kind of thing, as the planet is becoming more and more visible or less and less visible. That's when it tends to be intensified. And I sort of, like, it's interesting because, coming to the end of the calendar year here, 2018, and it's like this time of shifts and sort of a resurgence of certain energies and then a retreat of certain energies happening around this time. And I know I haven't told you what planets that I'm speaking about yet, so I'll do that now before I continue. So Saturn, the planet that's associated with our structures, with stability, with traditions, with obstacles, known as sort of the the tough teacher kind of thing, learning the hard way, not about the shortcuts, but brings rewards over time kind of thing. Saturn is retreating right now, going on a bit of a hiatus, right? and that's happening in Capricorn. So whatever area of the chart Capricorn sits for you, that's where that's happening. And then Mercury and Jupiter are rebirthing or becoming more visible. And what's significant, like Mercury is visible often enough, Jupiter is visible with the naked eye often enough, but this is kind of happening in partnership. And so it's more significant, right? So the other thing I wanted to say, just in terms of Jupiter, because we've heard a lot of talk about Jupiter moving into its home sign, and I've spoken about it a lot, of Sagittarius. But if you haven't sort of been feeling that hit of Jupiter kind of optimism and growth and expansion and that sort of thing, then you may notice a surge of that happening as, it becomes more visible, it moves further away from the sun. And it meets up with Mercury around the 21st. So I think the last thing I want to say before I specifically kind of get into the signs here about this is that if you use the analogy, right, like I was talking about the death and rebirth cycle, and I don't want you to think that I'm talking about this in the literal sense of death and rebirth. I mean, that's possible, but it's not, that's not what I'm saying here. It's a waxing and a waning kind of thing, right? It's a cycle. So think of, and as I mentioned to you, these things play out over a couple of weeks. It's not just a moment in time. So if you think about these ceremonies or the rituals kind of associated with death and rebirth in our culture anyway, and many cultures, those things don't just happen in a moment in time, right? The actual event of, say, the birth, it happens, depending how lucky you are, fairly quickly or not. But, but then there's all this, like there's a bigger picture that's surrounding that, right, as well. There's events leading up to it and post the actual event of the birth or of the passing, right, of the death. So think of it in those terms, and that may help to put it in context for you. So when Jupiter and Mercury are both rebirthing and then they're meeting up in the sky, it's a powerful sort of combination of energies, right? And quite traditionally known as benefic, so favorable. And people that are ruled by Jupiter and Mercury, so the mutable signs, Sagittarius, Pisces, Virgo, and Gemini, are probably going to maybe notice this a little bit more than others, but we will all feel it or notice it. And then the Saturn ruled folks, Capricorn, specifically Capricorn and Aquarius, because Saturn is the ancient ruler of Aquarius, just like Jupiter is the ancient ruler of Pisces, before Neptune and Uranus were discovered. They may feel that Saturn's retreat more because they're more sort of in tune with that Saturnian energy, right? But again, we will all sort of experience this on some level. And so as Saturn retreats, it's like the end of a phase of some kind of, again, things associated with Saturn, phase of hard work, of, traditions, relationship to authority. Things may dissolve, burdens may be lifted. And I think of, this is kind of a crazy example, but where I live, there's been this, without going into the details, the police have just solved a 20-year-old murder case. And it, when I was sort of reading and listening about the whole idea of Saturn going into retreat kind of thing, and how this can play out in different ways, but one of those ways is like lifting a long-term burden, right? And I think, oh my goodness, that really relates to this energy, what's happened here, and the family finally getting some closure. Um, you know, and the individual responsible getting caught. So, very Saturnian in a way as well. Um, so anyway, that's just an example, and I thought of that, so I thought I would share it with you. But um, I'm going to try to focus a little bit more here when I talk to the signs on the Mercury Jupiter thing, because it's a little more positive potentially, and maybe a little bit easier to notice. Although that sort of, again, it depends on you and your personal placements and things. I'll speak to my own personal life examples, right? Just to share with you how that plays out in the real world, kind of thing. So, okay, we're going to move through the signs, and I'm going to speak very briefly to where Saturn is going. I hesitate to use the word dormant. That's not really where Saturn is going on retreat or sabbatical. What house that's happening in, and then where Jupiter and Mercury are having a rebirth and coming together, and what house that's happening for each of us. So, Aries, let's start with you. Saturn is going on sabbatical in your 10th house, Aries. And so there may be an end of a phase or a retreat in terms of your public reputation, your career aspirations and ambitions, your relationship to authority or the father figure in some way, or a sort of a parental figure in some way. So that's Saturn, and then Jupiter and Mercury are being reborn in your 9th house, and that can be some manifestation in terms of travel plans, especially of the long distance variety. Some shift or rebirth in terms of your worldview, your philosophy, your outlook, your vision, your plans for the future, even issues around justice and around learning and education as well, because those are 9th house matters. So, look for some sort of something to transpire in that area of life. Taurus, Saturn is having a break in your 9th house. So may sound repetitive because it'll be the house that I just spoke to the previous sign about, where Mercury and Jupiter are, right? But Taurus, this is happening in your 9th house with Saturn. So maybe some kind of opportunity for rest and reflection, or just a dissolution of matters that have to do with those 9th house things, like the education, the travel, the connection with foreign cultures, your worldview, that kind of thing. And then Jupiter and Mercury are being rebirthed in your 8th house. So breathing some new life and perhaps some manifestation in the area that has to do with your intimate connections with others, your deep psyche, so maybe something's happening in terms of like an inheritance or some kind of an insurance payout or something like that, perhaps for you, Taurus. And then moving on to Gemini. I don't want to spend too much time here. I don't want to run out of time, but Gemini, Saturn is let's see here. Saturn is retreating in your 8th house. And so that is the house of intimacy, of shared resources, right? And so there may be some kind of something dissolving in that area for you. And this is happening. I didn't mention, and I should have mentioned, Saturn's going on sabbatical till around February, early February. So, but it's more intensified around this period when it's first starting to happen, kind of thing. And then Gemini, Jupiter and Mercury are being rebirthed in your seventh house. And so something may manifest there in terms of your one-to-one relationships. So your close personal relationships, there may be some kind of manifestation that has to do with that. I don't know, maybe, I'm just thinking maybe an engagement. This is just like, don't quote me on that. This is just an example that I'm giving. That's a possibility of something that can manifest there. And then moving on to Cancer, I'm going to pull this over here so I don't have to keep looking over there. My eyes are a bit tired. I'm feeling a little under the weather here. So moving on to Cancer. Cancer, Saturn is retreating in your seventh house. So if you've had some kind of, obstacles or hard work going on in your one-to-one relationships, then this may be dissolving right now. Or there may be some kind of an end of some sort of phase that you've been going through in terms of your one-to-one relationships, Cancer. And then Jupiter and Mercury are coming to light in your sixth house. And so that is the house of your daily routine and your health and wellness routine and how you are in service to others. And so something may manifest there that is quite positive and uplifting and lucky for you, Cancer. Moving on to Leo. Leo, this is Saturn is happening in your sixth house. So Saturn is going for a bit of a hiatus in your sixth house of daily routine and daily grind and again, how you are in service to others. And so this may be like an ending of a phase in that life area somehow, and perhaps the waning of some hard work or obstacles that you've been experiencing there. There may be the end of some obligations or responsibilities in that area of life. And then Jupiter and Mercury are being rebirthed in your fifth house. So there may be a resurgence of your creative self-expression or something having to do with your children or children that you work with or are associated with in any way. Or it may have to do with, your inner child, perhaps having some kind of rebirth, I guess I'll use that word as well, Leo. And so look for that area of life to have a hit of that sort of Jupiter energy, right? And to be for something to manifest there. Virgo, Saturn is going on sabbatical in your fifth house. So that's your house of creativity and children, and also the fun things in life. And so for me, right, I'm Virgo rising, and what I am noticing is that there's been a ton of hard work and obligations and responsibilities when it comes to my children's schedules, and lots of this has had to do with their own creativity, being involved in various things, and there's been a lot of running around and things like that, and that is coming sort of to a close. Like it's not quite there yet, but it's, I think we're going to get a bit of a breather for a bit as far as that goes. And then also, my own creative self-expression, just in terms of like, use my work that I do consider what, a lot of the work that I do creative in many ways, but sort of coming to an end phase for the end of the year. I'll be finishing up any readings in that, and then I'll take a bit of a break until January. So then Jupiter and Mercury, Virgo, are having a resurgence in your fourth house. So this is the house of home and family and your roots, your emotional security, your actual place of living. And so look for something positive to manifest there, right, Virgo? And it could be, simply a bit of a lovely kind of, family reunion, or it could be something, something actually like having to do with your place of living. So maybe you've been looking for a new place to live, a new house, and this is going to manifest for you around this time. Those are just a couple of examples. Okay, and moving on to Libra. Libra, this is happening in your fourth house. Saturn is going on retreat in your fourth house. And so this is perhaps a lot of sort of sense of obligation and responsibility and hard work is going on hiatus for a while, or there's a phase that has to do with your home and family and your place of living that is waning right now. And then Jupiter and Mercury are having a rebirth in your third house. And so this has to do with all things communication. It also has to do with your connections to siblings, cousins, your peers, neighbors, people in your community, that kind of thing. And so something positive and uplifting can manifest in that area of life over these next couple of weeks for you, Libra, in particular. And then there's Scorpio. Scorpio, Saturn is going on a vacation in your third house. So going to meet up with the sun and have some wise counsel there. And this has to do with your communications, right? So the way you communicate, tools of communication, the messages that go back and forth, also has to do with your siblings, your cousins, your peers, that kind of thing. And so there's an end of a phase happening in that area for you, Scorpio, and maybe the release of some burdens and responsibilities in that area. And then Jupiter and Mercury are being rebirthed in your second house. And so this is kind of cool, Scorpio, because this has to do with your material, your resources. So your money, your material resources, but also your internal resources, like what you draw on, your talents and skills to make your way, a stable place for yourself. It also has to do with your values and your self-worth. So something positive can manifest in this area of life for you. Maybe like a raise, maybe some kind of, a shift in your perspective about yourself, and so your self-worth and your self-esteem grows. It gets a boost of confidence. That's a possibility. Okay, moving on to Sagittarius. This is happening in your second house. Excuse me. And so what I mean by this is Saturn's retreat is happening in your second house. And so this has to do with what I just spoke to Scorpio about, your resources, your self-worth, your values, your money, right? And so this is the end of a phase here, and perhaps the release of some burdens and responsibilities, some dissolution of these things is happening. And then there's this opportunity to manifest something or for a rebirth in the first house, which is where Jupiter and Mercury are. And that has to all to do with your, like, yourself, literally yourself. So your physical being, of your physical appearance, your vitality, your approach to the world and how the world perceives you. So this is a time for some kind of positive fruition in that area of life for you, Sagittarius. So I'm sure if you sort of ponder that, you can kind of feel where that's happening, or how that's happening, how that's playing out for you. And then moving on to Capricorn. Capricorn, this is happening in your first house. So Saturn is going on a sabbatical in your first house. So there may have been a lot of focus or some hard work happening for you, and maybe you've been carrying some burdens and extra responsibilities and that kind of thing. In terms of your first house, so again, yourself, your health and not health and wellness routines, that's the sixth house, but your sense of vitality, your sense of sort of wellness, physical wellness in particular. Also your approach to the outside world, your how you are perceived by the outside world, right? As well. And so there is something waning in that area of life for you. And it's a good time to kind of have a bit of downtime right now for you, Capricorn, as far as all of that goes. And then Jupiter and Mercury are having a resurgence in your 12th house. And so this is happening in sort of the hidden realm for you, the inner life. So you may be having more opportunities for reflection and spiritual growth and connecting to something bigger than yourself. Do some deep inner work that can have positive manifestation around this time, Capricorn. Aquarius, this Saturn retreating is happening in your 12th house, so which I just spoke to Capricorn about. So there may have been a lot of sort of internal stuff going on for you, right? Or a lot of stuff in solitude happening, and maybe unconscious things bubbling up, and some burdens being carried there. And now with Saturn retreating, there can feel like you can put some of the weight of that down now, and for a little while anyway. And then you have the benefit of Jupiter and Mercury coming to light, being rebirthed in your 11th house of friendships and organizations and associations, and your hopes and dreams for the future and that kind of thing. And so there's opportunity for some kind of something positive, uplifting, beneficial to manifest in that 11th house for you, Aquarius. And last but not least, my Pisces. I'm a Pisces sun too, so I know it requires some patience when you have to wait. Anyway, so Saturn is retreating in the 11th house, Pisces. And so there may have been some burdens being carried in terms of your networks, your friendship groups. It might have been just like harder to connect with those folks, or may have been just feeling a little bit more difficult, in terms of all of that. And now with Saturn retreating for a while, it can get a little bit easier there. That burdens can be dissolved, and the responsibilities can shift and change, and be come to an end. Sort of a phase can come to an end in that area of life. And then Jupiter and Mercury are being rebirthed in your 10th house of career and public reputation and aspirations, and relationship to authority, to parental figures. And so something positive can manifest for you here in this area of life, Pisces. Maybe you're going to, I don't know, get a promotion. Maybe you are going to be recognized publicly with some kind of award. Those are just some examples as to how, potentially this could play out for you. And so that's all 12 signs. And I hope that, you found this interesting and a little bit different. And it gave you a deeper kind of understanding or a realization of just how far back the roots of astrology go and that kind of thing. And I'd love to hear what you think, and I do appreciate you being here as always. So if you found this, interesting or resonated with you, then hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, all of that. Okay, and I will talk to you next week, which I believe will be the last time before the Christmas holiday if you actually celebrate that. Okay, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.